Godfather of Anxiety here. Just wanted to do a short video about benign fasciculation syndrome and the symptoms that you can have with benign fasciculation syndrome and the reason why it is not only linked with anxiety but tends to cause such anxiety. It appears as though the understanding of BFS is getting better to some degree. I remember initially when I first researched this condition over 10 years ago, the symptoms were pretty much just muscle twitching. And there wasn't a lot of definitive links between anxiety and benign fasciculation syndrome. Now they are starting to believe there's a bidirectional relationship between the two conditions. In other words, one feeds the other and vice versa. So why I wanted to cover this is because I think one of the reasons why we might get so scared if we already have an anxiety condition, or even if we don't, you start getting muscle twitches, right? That's the primary symptom of benign fasciculation syndrome, is muscle twitching. And you go onto Google and you look, and as soon as you look up muscle twitching, boom, I guarantee you the first thing that's going to pop up is ALS. It's the first thing that always pops up. So that's going to get the wheels turning and, cause some anxiety. But the symptoms go beyond that. And that, I believe, is why sometimes this condition can cause and exacerbate anxiety to such a degree and actually make it so you develop health anxiety. If you look at, say, Wikipedia, or if you look at on the internet, you'll see that the symptoms are more than just fasciculations or twitching. For one thing, these twitches, and I mentioned this in one of my other videos on benign fasciculation syndrome, these muscle twitches can lead to cramping, especially if you're dehydrated. So if you're dehydrated, the same muscles that maybe twitch all the time, like for me, since 2008, my calves have twitched 24 hours a day. So if I get really dehydrated and, whether it be from working out or work or whatever, this can lead to cramps. These twitches, these benign twitches, they actually lead to cramps. And there's another variation of benign fasciculation syndrome that they call benign fasciculation cramping syndrome. And these people, they tend to get cramps just when they work their muscles, and they seem more prone to getting cramps, than just getting the twitches. And they actually say that's another kind of offshoot syndrome from benign fasciculation syndrome. Other symptoms that you can feel from this condition, and it really makes sense if you think about it. Whether these twitches are, you are causing them or not, which of course it's involuntary, it does take energy for these muscles to twitch. So generalized fatigue and weakness are common symptoms of benign fasciculation syndrome. And, you think about that. Now we're adding fatigue and weakness to twitching muscles. So remember what I said about your Google search. It's going to go to ALS. Now you're like, oh my goodness, I have fatigue and weakness and twitching. I'm a dead man walking. And that's really not the case at all. If you think about it, anytime muscles are contracting, it's going to expend energy. It's going to tire these muscles. And it's going to tire you overall. So, you know, and then add into the fact that if the twitches are really bad, it's going to play with your anxiety. And nothing tires someone out more than stress. Stress is the most exhausting thing that there is. Also, it can cause headache, can cause heartburn. They found a link between irritable bowel syndrome and benign fasciculation syndrome. So, you know, also numbness and tingling. And I wish I had known that numbness and tingling could be symptoms of benign fasciculation syndrome, because, and the second relapse I've had with anxiety disorder in 2020, one of the things that started happening to me is, along with more widespread muscle twitching, is I had a lot of numbness and tingling. And this scared me. Now, also, you need to reason on this as well. And I mentioned this in another video I did on benign fasciculation syndrome. If you're having numbness and tingling and muscle twitching, there's no way that's ALS. Remember, ALS is a motor neuron disease. So it's not going to affect the sensory nerve. So tingling and numbness would not be part of that condition. So in that sense, it could alleviate some of the anxiety if ALS is what you're worried about. But there's a number of other neurological conditions that can cause a great deal of anxiety that may include numbness and tingling. So if, you know, when you start thinking about the totality of all these symptoms, you know, they call it benign fasciculation syndrome because it's not degenerative, but these symptoms are beyond being benign. Muscle cramps, and for all of you out there who exercise a lot and have dealt with, you know, muscle cramps, they're no fun. I mean, that will shut you down. You get a couple of large muscles to simultaneously cramp, and there is nothing else on your mind except getting that cramp to go away. You know, also being tired or weak just from constant twitching. That goes beyond just being benign. Again, just because it's not degenerative doesn't mean that it's actually benign. And obviously, you know, when it can cause digestive issues as well. My experience with benign fasciculation syndrome matches these symptoms exactly. The last anxiety relapse that I had numbness, tingling, fatigue, widespread muscle twitching. Another thing. This is another one that they include now on the list of symptoms of benign fasciculation syndrome. And I swore I was doing this, but slurring your words. And again, we don't know if this is the anxiety playing into the twitching, but we do know that benign fasciculation syndrome in some people, and I'm one of those lucky people, causes your tongue to twitch. And I promise you guys, it felt like I was slurring my words. I would ask my family members if I was slurring my words, and they would assure me that I wasn't slurring my words. But again, because of the anxiety disorder that I have, I would record myself on my phone to make sure that I wasn't slurring my words. And the fact of the matter is, I've never been somebody who really enunciates my words that well. So it's a slippery slope when you think, oh, maybe I didn't pronounce that correctly. Maybe I'm starting to slur. Then you look at your tongue, it's twitching. You know, this can really play into anxiety. So why I made the video, though, is because, for one thing, benign fasciculation syndrome symptoms aren't always that benign, and they extend beyond just muscle twitching. And this, I believe, is part of the reason why they play into health anxiety as much as they do. Also, conversely, there's a relationship between, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and benign fasciculation syndrome. And again, there's an assertion recently by science that the two may have a bidirectional relationship. So that makes sense to me with my experience with this muscle twitching. I will say this, the first few years I noticed the muscle twitching, it didn't necessarily seem like it fed into my health anxiety, but then again, it was primarily confined to my calves. And as I've had this for longer and longer, now over 16 years, when the twitching, starts to spread out, that seems to be when I get more symptoms like fatigue, numbness, tingling. My tongue was tingling. It was twitching and tingling. My scalp was tingling and twitching. Very odd symptoms. And, these are symptoms that, again, a lot of them I've recorded just because, I had to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. Anyways, that's about all I wanted to say in the video. So guys, if you're having muscle twitches, but you're not losing strength, you're not losing function, don't allow the anxiety to create a monster. Try to remember that, any of the serious neurological conditions, they will declare themselves. You don't have to obsess about them. You'll start either losing function or start having definitive lack of function. And if you're not having that, but you find yourself hyper-focusing on a specific twitch, that's going to be the anxiety. And it's also going to be benign fasciculation syndrome. This is supposed to be a very rare condition. I'm not sure how rare it is because I've seen it in at least 2 other family members to varying degrees, maybe not to the extent that I have it, but neither one of them have been diagnosed with any serious neurological condition. So I don't know, again, if this is one of these modern phenomenons that you're going to start hearing a lot more about, or if it really is just a rare condition that I was unlucky enough to contract here. So don't get worked up over muscle twitches. Also, if the muscle twitches have tingling, cramping, that doesn't mean that you're on your way out or anything like that. In fact, remember, ALS involves just the motor nerves. So any sensory nerve issues like tingling or numbness is not going to have to do with ALS. I just wanted to do a video because for me, when I first researched this condition, again, it was just muscle twitches. And really they put it on the fact that you're tired, you drink too much caffeine, basically the American lifestyle, right? And, I haven't noticed really any correlation between caffeine consumption and the severity of my muscle twitches. I do notice sometimes they're more severe when I overwork a muscle. Sometimes I'll notice where if I haven't worked a muscle and they'll twitch quite a bit too. But as long as I don't overdo it, usually that doesn't exacerbate the twitches. Also, the other thing I've noticed personally for me is that, again, sugar consumption can, for whatever reason, increase the muscle twitches. And then again, if you're dehydrated, these twitches can go right into cramps. You don't want that. But, there are some things. I made a video about some things you can try. Maybe they'll work. Maybe they won't. But try your hardest not to not to focus, on it in such a way, hyper focus in such a way where it's going to start turning into health anxiety. And once you start going down that hill, it's really hard to stop. You'll start noticing things you'd never notice. Before I end the video, I just want to remind you guys, I mentioned this in another video I did. It might have been my health anxiety video, but I was really concerned because I had these muscle twitches. And, I was sitting in front of the fan in my chair, and I'm sitting there for about an hour thinking my left tricep has been twitching for an hour straight. And, I'm going through all the terrible planning I'm going to have to do because, that's how health anxiety works. And then I realized, I looked over and I saw it was the sleeve of my shirt fluttering because of the fan. It had nothing to do with muscle twitches. But that's what happens. That's what happens when benign fasciculation syndrome mixes with anxiety and develops into health anxiety. And that's why I made the video, because you don't want to get to that point. If you guys are having some muscle twitches, don't sweat it. If they persist, feel free to tell your primary. If you notice something maybe isn't working correctly, maybe then you should be referred to a neurologist. But let the doctors decide, and remember that it's really likely, it's super likely that you don't have anything serious wrong, and that you're going to be fine. So I just wanted to, again, that's why I've done these benign fasciculation syndrome videos, because there's definitely a link with anxiety. And, during my second relapse in 2020, it had me convinced, literally convinced, that I was dying. I was positive I had ALS or some other serious neurological condition, and I was on my way out. And I don't want you guys to get to that point and then end up wasting months or years of your life trying to figure out what's going on, or, just basically conceding that you're dying like I did for a while there during my second relapse. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Until my next video, guys, take care.